The first sign of trouble wasn't the letter shoved into my mailbox, though that alone was enough to make my stomach twist. It was written in Karen's unmistakable scrawl, bold and self-important, demanding that I cease agricultural activities immediately or face daily fines of $1,000. I read it 3 times, each word pounding louder in my head. This was my land, my little farm where I grew tomatoes, tended chickens, and found peace after losing my husband 2 years earlier. I wasn't flashy, not political, not even confrontational. I was just a woman trying to live simply, quietly, and with dignity. But to Karen, a self-appointed HOA queen, obese with power and dripping arrogance, it was nothing but prey. The second sign came when I spotted her on my property the next morning. There she was, clipboard in hand, stomping through my rows of beans like a bulldozer in pearls. She sneered at my chicken coop, jabbed at my rain barrels, and finally shouted toward the porch where I stood frozen. "This isn't farmland, it's a subdivision. You're violating the aesthetics of the community. Tear it down or pay the price." Her voice was sharp, slicing through the still air like she was judge, jury, and executioner. My hands shook with fury, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "Karen, this farm has been here longer than the HOA. It's protected by zoning rights and deed covenants. You have no authority here." She smirked, that awful smug grin that made every neighbor's stomach churn. "We'll see what the courts think after I bury you in fines. 1,000 a day. Let's see how long your little chickens last then." She strutted off, leaving crushed bean leaves in her wake, and for a moment, I wanted to crumble. But then I remembered I wasn't alone. My brother, Daniel, had been staying with me while on leave. He wasn't just any brother. He was Commander Daniel Reyes of the United States Navy, a man whose quiet authority carried more weight than Karen's entire HOA board combined. He had heard every word from inside the farmhouse, and when he stepped out onto the porch, the look on his face wasn't just anger, it was resolve. "She's playing games with the wrong family," he said, his voice low, steady, the kind of tone that made even storms pause. The next week was a blur of threats and escalation. Karen began mailing me fines daily, plastering notices on my gate, even trying to cut off my water by tampering with a shared line. Neighbors whispered apologies but admitted they were too scared to cross her. She bragged at HOA meetings that she would make an example of me. "My chickens were an eyesore," she said. "My tomatoes dragged down property values." But then came the twist. Daniel uncovered something none of us expected. Using his military connections, he discovered that Karen wasn't just harassing Mesh, was part of a scheme to rezone the land. She had struck a deal with a developer to clear my farm, along with 2 others, for luxury townhouses. My eviction wasn't about aesthetics. It was about greed. Daniel brought the proof to me, thick files of emails, contracts, and signatures that tied Karen directly to the scam. When Karen showed up again, marching with 2 hired men to inspect my property, Daniel was waiting. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even need to. He stepped forward in full uniform, ribbons gleaming in the morning sun, and addressed her like a superior dressing down a reckless subordinate. "Ma'am, you are trespassing on federally zoned agricultural property. You are also implicated in fraudulent land development schemes. I suggest you stand down immediately." Karen's face drained of color. The neighbors who had gathered behind their fences gasped. One of the hired men muttered. She said this was legal and backed away. But Karen tried to hold her ground, waving her clipboard like a sword. "This is my authority. I'll fine you into the ground." Daniel took a step closer, his presence towering. "I don't answer to clipboards. I answer to the United States. And I have already forwarded your actions to federal investigators." This ends today. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from across the street, Mr. Alvarez, the quiet widower who everyone thought was just a retiree, stepped forward holding a folder. "I've kept records of her fraud for years," he said. "If you're finally taking her down, you'll need these." He handed the papers to Daniel, and the neighbors erupted in cheers. Karen stumbled back, sputtering. "You're all against me." But this time, no one believed her. And when the sheriff's car rolled up minutes later, summoned by Daniel's call, the officer didn't even need an explanation. He saw the uniform, the evidence, the trembling woman clutching her clipboard, and cuffed her on the spot. The neighbors clapped. The chickens clucked. And I, the simple woman she thought she could destroy, stood tall on my porch watching her empire crumble. The news of Karen's arrest spread through our valley like wildfire. For years, she had strutted through our streets with her clipboard like it was a crown, barking fines, threats, and humiliations at anyone who dared resist her will. But that morning, the image of her being shoved into the back of a sheriff's cruiser with handcuffs biting into her wrists traveled faster than her poison ever had. By sundown, neighbors who once whispered in fear gathered openly at my farm, clapping me on the back, hugging Daniel, marveling at how quickly the tide had turned. The sheriff didn't take long to file charges. Fraud, conspiracy to commit land theft, harassment, trespass. The list grew longer with every new file Daniel and Mr. Alvarez handed over. The developer Karen had partnered with tried to distance himself, but the emails and signed contracts left no room for denial. Karen had promised him 3 cleared plots, including mine, in exchange for a generous payout. She wasn't just drunk on power, she was cashing in on it. The trial was set for midsummer, and by then the entire town had taken sides. Or rather, one side, the side of truth. The courthouse was overflowing the first day, reporters crammed shoulder to shoulder, veterans in dress uniforms lining the pews, neighbors clutching folders of evidence. Karen entered the courtroom bloated with fury, her expensive suit wrinkled, her once smug face now pale and twitching. She carried herself like a queen forced to walk through mud, glaring at anyone who dared meet her eye. The prosecutor didn't waste time. Exhibit A, the $350,000 fine letter. Exhibit B, the fraudulent HOA bylaws she had fabricated and mailed to residents. Exhibit C, the contracts with the developer, signed in her unmistakable hand. When the jury saw the developer's email, some of them saying, "Once I get rid of the farm woman, you'll have your lots," the room erupted in gasps. Karen's lawyer sputtered excuses. He claimed she was just following procedure, that the money was for community improvements, that she was being framed. But then came the testimonies. Jessica stood, holding her toddler, and described how Karen had threatened to take her child away because of unsafe toys in the yard. Mr. Nolan recounted how Karen trespassed to measure his fence and threatened him with legal action when he asked her to leave. One by one, neighbors told their stories, voices cracking, fists clenched, some breaking into tears. It was no longer about fines or tomatoes or chickens. It was about dignity, stolen piece by piece until no one felt safe in their own homes. And then it was my turn. I stood, hands shaking, and told the jury what Karen had done to me. How she had stomped through my farm, crushing bean plants under her heel. How she had threatened to bury me in fines until my chickens and tomatoes were gone. How she had laughed at me, calling me a simple woman who could never stand against her. I looked at the jurors and said, "She was right about one thing. I am simple. I just wanted peace, a farm, a life of quiet dignity." But she mistook simple for weak. And weakness is not what you saw when my brother stood up to her. It's not what you see in this community now. Simple doesn't mean powerless. It means rooted. It means strong. The jury nodded, their faces set like stone. But the twist that sealed her fate came when Daniel took the stand. In his Navy uniform, his presence commanded the room. He laid out the entire fraud like a military briefing, timelines, evidence, contracts. He showed how Karen had conspired with the developer, how she had falsified HOA records, how she had pocketed thousands in fake fines. And then he said, steady as ever, "I serve a country that gives people like her the freedom to abuse authority. But I also serve a country that has laws to stop it. And today, I ask you to hold her accountable." Karen couldn't take it. She exploded, shrieking from the defense table. "He's lying. He's just using his uniform to scare you. You're all against me because I had the guts to lead." Her face was red, her voice cracking, spit flying. The judge slammed his gavel, warning her to sit down. But she didn't. She screamed louder until deputies forced her back into her chair. The jury watched every second, their expressions hardening with every word. The verdict was inevitable. Guilty. On all counts. The judge's words cut like a sword. 3 years in state prison. Restitution to every resident you defrauded. And a permanent prohibition from holding office or serving on any HOA. The gavel struck, and the room erupted in cheers. Karen slumped, her power finally stripped bare. Deputies cuffed her, dragging her from the courtroom as she wailed, but no one listened anymore. The true victory came afterward. The HOA was dissolved by court order, its corruption too deep to salvage. In its place, we built something better, a community circle, open to all, driven not by fines or threats, but by cooperation. At our first gathering, neighbors brought food, kids ran through the fields, and laughter filled the air. We planted a community garden where the old HOA office had stood, rows of vegetables tended by families who once lived in fear of violations. A month later, at a dedication ceremony, the neighbors unveiled a gift for me. A wooden board, hand-carved and painted, planted at the entrance of my farm. Burned into its surface were the words, "Rooted in respect." I touched the carving, my eyes wet, my heart swelling with gratitude. Grandpa smiled from his chair. Daniel saluted the flag we raised together, and for the first time in years, the valley felt free. Karen's name faded into a cautionary tale, a story told at barbecues and campfires. Remember when she tried to steal the farm? People laughed. But beneath the laughter was something deeper, a vow that never again would one person's greed control an entire community. And so I leave you with this question. When someone like Karen abuses authority and tries to crush the simple lives of ordinary people, where does true justice lie? Is it in the prison sentence she serves, or in the unity of a community that chooses to rise above her reign? Right or wrong, I know this. Karen targeted a simple woman's farm, and in the end, she only harvested her own downfall.